Yeah, welcome everyone to our guest speaker event today. My name is Catherine and I'm a student partner here at the Entrepreneurship Hub. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm super excited to introduce to you all our amazing alumni founder in just a few minutes, but really quickly, I'll give a rundown of today's format. So I'm gonna introduce our guests with a brief bio. Then I'll hand over the mic to our guests to describe their venture, and then we'll engage in a brief interview so that everyone can hear their story. And yeah, if you haven't been to guest speaker yet, we also have an interactive portion, and we use this platform that's kind of interactive, kind of like Polly B if you've ever used it. So yeah, we'll have the opportunity to do that, and you guys will be able to engage with the guest speaker that way. And yeah, so Mike will see those results and we'll answer with live responses and reactions. So yeah, our questions today for me will be largely based on the Hub's pillars, which are right over there. And we use these as the central ideas for everything we do at the Hub, because we believe that they're essential in developing the skills and mindset of an entrepreneur. And yeah. Alrighty, with that being said, I'm super excited to introduce our guest. So I'll go over a brief bio. So after graduating from William & Mary, Michael Zung got a master's at the University of Washington and then went to work in finance. And even though his degree was in international studies, he'll get more into that later on. And in the late 90s, he found himself working for internet ad pioneer DoubleClick, which was later acquired by Google, and moved to Asia Pacific. And after leaving DoubleClick, he decided to set up his own digital ad agency, which was later acquired, making it his first exit. And some of his hobbies include playing the guitar, basketball, and when not working crazy hours. So we're really thankful that he was able to make it out from make some time and come from New York. So we really appreciate this time. So yeah, with that, how are you doing and how was the drive?
First of all, thanks a lot for all you coming over as well today. It's great to see you all, and thrilled to be back on campus to share my story, my founder story. I wasn't sure, how many people would show up, so it's great to see kind of a full house today. I gotta live up to all of this, so let's see where it leads. But I'm thrilled to be here.
Alrighty, well, thank you for coming, and I think we're ready to move on to our interactive portion, where we'll have a mix of audience and guest speaker questions. So for everyone, we need you to pull out your phones and open up menti.com. And then if you can give me a quick thumbs up when you're ready with that. You can either use the QR or just look up menti.com and then use this code. So it looks like you have a bunch of thumbs up. Are we waiting for anyone to wait on? All right, so I think we can move on to our first question. So this is for the audience and you can start thinking of responses, but what are some valuable qualities to have as an entrepreneur? Right, I'm seeing resilience a lot, perseverance, one of the bigger ones, risk-taking. And then we have some smaller ones that kind of fall under that. Oh, we're seeing one of our pillars, we see grit, passion, patience. Okay, so as you're looking at the responses being populated in the word cloud, are there any that resonate with you? And is there anything that you feel is missing?
Wow. First time using this Menti. I mean, does everybody use it in every class? I mean, I'm like always feeling like I thought I was, way ahead of the curve back in school and I could do PowerPoint really well or something like that. And, just seeing these kinds of things is pretty exciting.
I would say most people here are using Polly B or something similar, but.
Yeah, well, this is awesome. Because you had word cloud in the notes and I was like, what the heck's that mean? So this is new to me, so that's pretty exciting. Let's see, so, and I kind of thought about and thought through, my journey, my entrepreneur journey, before coming in, obviously. And I would definitely say, there's a lot of challenges, and a lot of pivots for sure. So grit and resilience are definitely right up there in terms of what I would expect and ability to pivot for sure. So I totally agree with the crowd. I think I think like resilience and risk taking were kind of taking over, and then they sort of fell off a little bit. I thought those might win in some sense. Let's see, what's missing? You know, I thought through it, and I actually have, I prepared some visuals as well. I mean, I think one of the themes that seems to resonate with me throughout all of my entrepreneurial activities, and I've started 2 companies of my own, but I've also done, I guess you call it entrepreneurial work within large companies like HSBC, et cetera. And
Do you mind defining that a little more for those who are not familiar?
yeah, so entrepreneurship, so in other words, and a lot of you might run into this probably more often in your careers than perhaps being an entrepreneur, but I mean, if you have an opportunity within a company to start a company, so I started HSBC Direct, which became Advance at HSBC, which was sort of their branchless proposition at the time. And I mean, I had just as much risk-taking, resilience, and perseverance and pivoting with that as I did with any entrepreneurial outside of it. But I would say that the theme that could be missing is a little bit of networking, and I'm not seeing that one here. If I just read Elon Musk's thing, I don't know if you guys are familiar, Walter Isaacson just put out that thing in last September, right? I just read Yves Chouinard, who is founder of Patagonia's book, Let My People Go Surfing. Totally opposite people, okay? I mean, but the themes are like, all of them needed help, which is kind of surprising. Like Elon Musk would help does he need? I always think about that, right? But I mean, without Peter Thiel, without his PayPal mafia, I mean, y'all know this story. It's a very famous story about Elon Musk, right? I mean, like 3 rockets, they're on a deserted island in the Pacific, right? And they all blow up. Most people know that story? Yeah, and so he actually ran out of money. He actually flat ran out. Well, the story goes, we only had money for one more. No. He actually flat ran out of money, right? And he had to call Peter Thiel, which was the PayPal co-founder, and say, can you loan me 20 billion? And he goes, I don't know, you did me a solid before, I don't think it's gonna work, but okay, here's 20. And lo and behold, that rocket was crazy success. That 4th one was crazy successful. And then, I mean, even more recently when he needed to buy Twitter, we all know that, right? X. He had to call Larry Ellison, couldn't do the deal unless Larry loaned him, this time it was 10 billion, or a couple billion anyway. But I mean, I think that's really an interesting theme, because I certainly needed help too. I mean, I wasn't an entrepreneur on my own either. I mean, I always, had a co-partner or a founder or a private office family behind me or something. Somebody needs something. And when I work with like accelerators in New York, that's another thing that they constantly write a list of 100 people to call, and figure out and just call them. So I think that's one thing. All these are really, really good, by the way. I just was, your question was which one's missing, and so I think maybe that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see from the stories that you talked about that it's very important to network, and I'm sure that you all will connect with Mike after this on that.
It's true. He's that one too. All right.
So moving on, just a question for you. Tell us about a time at William & Mary and what experiences you might remember fondly and have shaped your profession.
Yeah. And on this one, I think I'll just go into sort of my education in general in some ways, but yeah, William and Mary, I didn't know what I was going into, to be frank. I thought economics were good. I thought that I liked political science. I liked studying international type things. And I remember being like in my sophomore year and I go, well, I've taken international government, international business, international economics. Is there an international major? So it actually ended up to be an international studies major. I went abroad to China. We were the first class to go to China, so it was 1988, and we had just established the program. Nobody from William and Mary had ever, that I know of, it was certainly not officially. So 8 of us went over there officially to study at Beijing Language Institute, which was the exchange university there. So that was an incredible experience. My roommate stayed for another semester until right before Tiananmen, 1989, where there was a student demonstration. I think, does everybody aware of that? It was just in the news the other day, actually. So that was pretty eventful, I would say. I thought I'd always want to do something in Asia Pacific, which I did end up doing. So I think that was pretty instrumental to me. I was actually in ROTC as well, Army ROTC, and I thought that was pretty influential for me as well. Just in terms of, you learn a lot about leadership in there as well, right? I mean, you take courses on. I mean, you're trained to be an officer in the United States Army, so it's amazing what you can take away from that as well in terms of leading people and leading the charge and being technically and tactically proficient, you know, which is all good for entrepreneurship too, right? I mean, again, the Elon Musk book, he gets right into coding and he gets right onto the shop floor. I was like, well, I mean, that's pretty similar. I mean, I was seeing MacArthur there, you know, to be frank, you know, when I was reading and listening to that book, but and I take a lot of lessons from that. Yeah, that's that.
That's a good.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to how would you define success in your life? And then if we can have the audience respond in short answers.
Okay.
And as you look at responses on the screen, any similarities, any differences with your definition of success?
All right, let's do it.
And then we can also hit the space button to get a grouping of responses. See what that looks like.
Okay.
All right, so any similarities, any differences?
Oh, yeah,
here?
for sure. I think no regrets is a good one, right? I mean, because even if you fail, like after 2 years or whatever it is, A, you learn a ton. And B, I think that in 2024, it's far less of a black mark on you because I think in 1990 it certainly was. Oh, I need a mic. Hello. Yeah, so in 1990, I'm sure it was far more of a black mark to have a failed business than in 2024. It's almost like a badge of achievement in some ways, especially in Silicon Valley or in certain environments where it's almost seen as a success. And certainly you can learn a ton from it. It's worth exploring because you don't really want to have that regret. I mean, I'm sure all of you have some sort of brewing idea in your head, and you would love to explore it further. And certainly worth the effort. So I think that's a strong one. Financial freedom is always nice. I mean, I obviously have a lot of entrepreneur friends, and after you've been an entrepreneur for like 20 years, it's really, really hard to have a boss. Yeah. Yeah, I always say, well, yeah, but when you're an entrepreneur, you certainly have a boss. I mean, you have clients that are your boss, you have a board, you probably have some sort of investors that are pretty much like your boss. But having said that, they're not really your boss, right? I mean, the company is the boss. You tend not to have the politics that you often have in other fields. Nothing against academics, but it happens once in a while, right? I mean, like, you have a dean or somebody, or in the government or the military or whatever it might be that just has a certain agenda, and it might not be even make sense. It's just that you have to do it because you need the same budget for next year, and so you're just gonna like spend a ton of money on nothing just because you don't want to lose the budget for the next year, right? I mean, yeah, that's so typical of all those types, even large companies for sure. And it can get super, super frustrating. So I think that's a pretty strong one there. Yeah, but impact on others, I do want to touch on that a little bit because when I thought about entrepreneurship, I didn't think about that too much. But as I started Bloomist, which we'll maybe talk about a little bit more later, but I mean, we're certainly talking about a sustainable company from its core. And reading about Patagonia, you can certainly understand how everything was built from scratch to be completely sustainable for them. And they're sort of the benchmark of companies in that area. And there's something that they've kind of created called a B Corp, and you apply for it and you get certification on it. Like Ben and Jerry's is B Corp, or I mean, many companies that you might kind of be familiar with are B Corps. And that idea is to say, like you learn in business school, it's all about the shareholders and return on investment. And the B Corp says, well, yeah, but your charter has to change a little bit to also incorporate return on the community, return on the environment, not just return to shareholders. So I think that's something I've kind of learned, and the impact on others more recently, I think.
And last but not least, a question that we ask all guest speakers, or a variation of it. Our next question is ranking our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking, which are over there again, by level of importance. So if you can think of the one that you think is most important, and for students as well.
Yeah, I remember coming in here the first time and seeing Graham, and we took a picture next to this wall. I mean, it's really kind of amazing. And I do believe the biggest challenge is the openness to risk element, and really just kind of failing wisely, in my mind. Just because that's the one that probably holds us back the most. I mean, we could all improvise. We all probably have grit around it. Like, we're a boy and Mary, we have to have grit, right? So those things kind of come with the territory more, and almost like a baseline. I think where we need to push ourselves perhaps a little bit more is on that openness to risk. And if you read all these bios, and again, I just read that Patagonia versus Elon type thing, and they're so polar opposite in terms of how they treat people. I think we all kind of know that Elon Musk story of firing people on the spot, and Patagonia says he's never fired a person in his life or something. So it's kind of fascinating that you have two polar opposites, but they're, I mean, Yves Sherrod, who founded Patagonia, and he's like a mountain climber, right? I mean, so he almost died falling off of it. His best friend, I don't know if you guys know, founder of Esprit, you might know, but I mean, actually did die in Patagonia. So super risk takers. Same guy founded North Face, by the way. I mean, so this guy's pretty well known. But yeah, so I mean, and obviously Elon's also huge risk taker. So I mean, Bill Gates sold DOS to IBM. I always find that story hilarious. Before he even bought DOS, he didn't even actually create DOS. He bought it from a guy for $50,000. I always find that story amusing. I mean, how much risk is that? Can you believe it? I mean, that's like Microsoft now is the most valuable, actually. I think it surpassed Apple, right? I mean, it's the most valuable company. Started that way, literally that way. So kind of fascinating.
Seems like women married students seem to also think that openness to risk is very important among students. So that's cool to see that we have that's on the line.
Yeah.
So yeah, so now we're gonna move into a bit of your venture of Bloomist. And we're gonna dig deeper, move into some questions about your venture and how it came to be.
Right.
So take us to the beginning, before your venture was a reality, how did you initially discover this opportunity, if you want?
Yeah. Is this where I could use the slides?
Yeah.
All right, because I go way back, I go further back in a way, because I started another company, and I also kind of cover that a little bit. But I'll try to be, and it's that one, yeah. I'll try to be sort of like rhythmic here and do this relatively quickly. But yeah, I mean, these are logos that I put up just to sort of summarize the types of things, and we kind of went through my academic background a little bit with your questions. But you're gonna drive? Yeah?
Yep.
All right, so let's just do this like 20 seconds each. Yeah, so I was international studies, we talked about that. I found this interesting, right? I mean, you guys all heard of Reddit? You all know it's public. As of yesterday, it popped initially 70%, but I guess, you know, it went down to 38%, but pretty impressive. I thought it was kind of funny that it was founded by two UVA students. One of them was a history major. So any history majors in here? I don't know if there's any history majors, but I mean, the point being, right? I mean, it's you know, two liberal arts guys. And I just sort of put a little list together. I actually had to almost verify. I used ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT, okay, who founded a company that wasn't a comp sci or business school major, and this is what it came back with, and I thought it was kind of funny. I mean, I had no idea Michael Dell was a biology major or Mark Zuckerberg was psychology. Now, he did have a dual in comp sci. And he didn't finish, obviously. But still, I found it pretty interesting, right? Or Airbnb was industrial design. So it really can come from anywhere, I think. It's really about the passion. All right, next. Yeah, so just like probably a lot of you, I thought I was gonna be like professor, really, or join the CIA. And I mean, seriously, one of the guys I went to China with, I actually went through the whole CIA like interview process, you know?
Anyone here want to be a professor?
Or CIA. Really? No? I mean, no Robert Gates is here or whatever, future or something, no? I thought I might be. I mean, that's why I went to University of Washington and was studying that whole, like getting into China and how to like monitor and how to analyze and all that stuff. And I went through the whole interview process and they brought me around and they gave me a report from one of the, and it actually had the guy's name at the top. And I said, I went to China with this guy. Like, I was wondering what happened to him. And, so at any rate, but then that turned. I joined kind of a student organization or actually a research or sort of like GRI at University of Washington. And the guy who led it was pretty forward thinking, actually. He was like, maybe we could put this on the interweb or whatever it was, like Prodigy. We were literally going to put this database of professors and their research on Prodigy, which was the thing at like AOL. I don't know if you guys, you know, like dial up. And I was like, no, nobody's gonna look at that. But we actually explored it and we actually put it up there, but nobody looked at it. And so I was like, why don't we create a book out of it? Why don't we sell like parts of the book and the pages and do like a yellow pages kind of thing? Now, that's a pretty good idea. So we actually created this book. I just Googled this morning, literally. It's still like Googleable. And then, in fact, they did 20 volumes of this book. And they always, after me, they always put the intern, like I was an intern, you know, as one of the co-authors of the book. So I thought it was pretty cool. Now it's still, I mean, it was accessage.org. You can still like log that thing in and it still goes to NBR. But yeah, so then they go, well, you're pretty good at business. So maybe you should pivot to business. I'm like, all right, maybe that is more my calling than being in the CIA or being a college professor. So that's kind of like where this entrepreneurial thing got started. So let's kind of move through. Yeah. Okay. So then one of my first jobs was working for this guy who worked for this guy. Okay. So I didn't work for this guy who apparently is still alive, which is good to see. But Larry Bossidy, I mean, he worked for Jack Welch, this guy, and Jack Welch in the '90s. He was like the Elon Musk of the '90s, right? I mean, he ran GE, and GE was a strong company, and this guy was one of his mafia, I guess you could call that as well. And my boss worked for him and really taught me like what gets measured gets done. And I moved into a financial planning role, which was kind of really pivotal to my career in some ways, because financial planning was a really cool job where you could actually meet with every single C-level executive and every division head. Because you needed to know their budget and then pull it all together. And so I learned database, which is really, even today, I find knowing how to put together a database from the basics is so critical. I mean, whether you're using Tableau or whether you're using, Airtable or whether you're using Excel or whatever, or Google Sheets, knowing how a database is put together is so important to me today. So I think it's just like learning those types of tools like Google Sheets or whatever better than anybody else, or the new tools that are coming out is so critical to a career. So next, yeah. And I learned how to do this. So like make a waterfall in PowerPoint, and I think I got like my next job from it. So yeah, when DoubleClick was looking for somebody, and my old boss moved there. Next slide. Yeah, I just got referred, right? So I think that I have just a theme here. I mean, my theme is you have to be technically and tactically proficient, which is what I learned in Mary, but you also have to continue the network, that you have. It's like two things, technically, tactically proficient and the network. Next. So yeah, I was at DoubleClick. I just pulled this up the internet this morning, okay? 4.6 billion in 1999, up from 1.92 billion, okay? So it's 1% of total advertising, 1%, okay? So next slide. So DoubleClick had a board member, right? And in fact, I've talked to the founder of DoubleClick about this, like, how did you get this guy on the board? And he said, I just randomly called him and he actually accepted. This is a guy named Tom Murphy, okay? Now, the CEO of Disney is a guy named Bob Iger. Okay, he wrote a book, right? The first 70 pages are devoted to this guy, which is his boss, right? And so I just remember him coming into a lunch one day, Tom Murphy, this guy who just died last year, right? And he said, I just joined this board because, and I don't have any other boards except for like some charities, except for this board, okay? And because I know digital marketing is going to be bigger than anything. And he said this, I remember, he said, like night follows day, this is going to be huge. It was 1% of total, right? I just showed you that, 1% of total advertising. But he was in cable and he sold his company to ABC, which became Disney, right? And he just saw the future that was digital, right? So what is digital today? Next slide. It's like 64% of total advertising is now digital, right? 64%. So what that means is, okay, well, is a commercial digital? It is actually. So when you're watching Netflix and a commercial comes on, that's digital, right? So if you're driving down the street and there's an outdoor billboard and it happens to be not a flat printed billboard, but a digital one, that's digital. Because somebody from the back of a computer, like you could literally be changing that ad and swapping it out digitally right now, I mean, right? And it could be in a billboard on the highway somewhere, right? So it's kind of amazing. And that just also made me constantly thinking, right? And everybody in this room who's thinking entrepreneurial as well, like where are eyeballs where there's not advertising? Right? I mean, and now it's TikTok, right? I mean, TikTok is going crazy, and it's like one of the, I mean, obviously it might be banned in the US by the end of the week, but at the same time, I mean, they have and that's why there's a huge advertising gap with the eyeballs on TikTok, But then you got to think about the next thing. You know, sponsorships on YouTube is really, really a big gap. Like Mr. Beast always says, okay, yeah, I make 70 million a thing, but it's still way less than I would make somewhere else. In fact, he just did an Amazon deal for like $1 billion the other day. I don't know if you guys follow that. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that for me is really, really interesting. Or whatever you're doing, right? Just kind of analyzing where there's a gap. Next, I mean, and this story lives with me forever. So I had to just go to Asia at DoubleClick in year 2000, start up China. China's just been going crazy. I can't remember. Nick, let's go to the next one. Yeah, okay. So I'll hold this one for a second. But I went to China. I mean, I set up DoubleClick in China, and you might think, okay, Google in China, didn't they close? Yeah, but they always had an ad sales team. In fact, it still exists today. And in fact, a lot of the team also went to help start up Facebook in China. And you're like, well, Facebook's been blocked forever. Yeah, I know. They have a huge ad sales team there, though. I mean, they just did 15 billion last year. So my ex-colleague who used to sit next to me runs that. And she just did 15 billion in sales last year. 15 billion. I mean, Temu itself did 2 billion through her, right? So that's kind of crazy, right? So in 2003, there was a bubble burst in the US, .com, you know, sort of bubble burst. And so there's a lot of companies called pets.com and stuff, they crashed and people laughed and then came back as Chewies. You know, basically it does work. That's the other interesting thing about entrepreneurship. I mean, think about what didn't work then, but has the infrastructure now. Okay, now we have smartphones and now we can ship stuff a lot cheaper. So dog food can be shipped instead of losing money on it. So that's another interesting thing. So at any rate, I was at DoubleClick and there was a China boom and a US bust. So a lot of US companies wanted to get into China. A lot of them were asking me, well, this is another interesting entrepreneur life. This company, Western Union, who was a DoubleClick client, they literally asked me and they said, hey, you got to go start an agency. You got to go start consulting. We don't know how to do, use your tools. I mean, DoubleClick's not part of Google, right? I mean, it's the thing, you know, we do advertising, we send advertising, but we don't teach them. We're not an agency. We weren't an agency, they're still not an agency, right? So they needed help. And it's you know, this could be a really good opportunity to just jump out and help. The interesting thing is they weren't my first client. In fact, I finally got them 5 years later, but they never were my first client. So don't just be okay, I'm gonna start this healthcare company and it's gonna be whatever healthcare is down here, you know, and that's gonna be my client. I remember talking to one entrepreneur who was dead set who's gonna sell to this standing in line technology to Disney World. I'm like, that's great. But I mean, can't you open it up like King's Dominion? I'd be yeah, oh yeah, maybe. But I'm gonna sell it to Disney World. I'm okay. Anyway, so Western Union was not the first client, but in fact, who was? It was a company called Wall Street Institute was the first client. Okay, they talk English all over Asia. And I printed a card from my from my printer. So that kind of thing. But yeah, soon later I got Marriott, I got Turner, Toys R Us, Coach, eBay. Toys R Us there is owned by a company called Li & Fung, which is a really, really big apparel company that helps a lot of apparel companies make stuff. I mean, they have 15,000 factories in 40 countries, so they work with all the top apparel brands to make stuff, but they also own a lot of retailers, and that'll come back in the story later. But yeah, so Toys R Us, and then HSBC. So HSBC was a client of OneZeno, and then let's go to the next. Yeah, and then that's why I had a chance. They actually invited me, and I sold most of my agency to a Japanese VC. So I moved to HSBC, and I worked there for 5 years, starting up this direct bank. Let's just keep going. Yeah, so they were trying to base it on a company called First Direct they founded, or ING Direct, which is now owned by Cap One. So I mean, that's the whole kind of huge in Northern Virginia. But I mean, yeah, so we were trying to base ours on that. And so next slide. Yeah, and we did pretty successfully. I mean, we reached 11 billion in deposits, 620,000 customers, Asian deposits, which was my area. 1.2 billion, 240,000 customers. And this was the highlight. So it's the third. I mean, we were like one of 3 highlights of HSBC for the year, which I thought I was pretty proud of. 330,000 employees, and we're in highlights. I mean, that's what you get excited about, I suppose, when you work for like a super huge company or a bank like them. But then the financial crisis hit, like entering into 2008. I think when they wrote this, they didn't know what the hell was going to come later. So 2008 to 2009, I think we're all pretty familiar with what happened. So the Great Recession happened. They took down like sort of this whole thing. They pivoted a ton. They wanted me to move. They sent me to Indonesia to do stuff, which was interesting. But the Japanese VC that bought my agency wanted to sell it back to me, and I was like, yeah, I'll buy it. So the next thing happened, I bought it, and then I sold it to another company. Do you have another slide there? Is it popping? Okay, yeah, there you go. So I bought the company back, and then I sold it to this public UK-based agency that acquired us, which was called One Zeno, was the name of the agency. So I worked there. You have to, like, especially in the agency world, you have to do an earnout. So I stayed there a few years. I had a chance to move back with them, so I moved back to the United States. My boss at that time was pretty interesting. Next slide. It was Andy Cunningham. She helped launch the Mac in 1984. I think we've all heard of a Mac. In fact, we're using one. So she worked for a guy named Reg McKenna. Again, in the Walter Isaacson book, if you're interested, and she gave Walter Isaacson a lot of the information in the book, but she was our boss. So it was pretty exciting. She was played by Sarah Snook. I don't know if you're enough any Succession watchers. Okay, a few people. I always joke about that to her because I don't think anybody really knew Sarah Snook in 2015. But again, a theme, right? A theme. I mean, just knowing people, learning about people, getting to know them, that sort of thing. I mean, it's a theme with everybody who's successful in their lives, right? Nobody got there on their own. I mean, even if you're a basketball player, right? I mean, nobody got there on their own or whatever. I mean, whatever you do in life, you don't get there on your own. Next. Okay, so Bloomist. We're finally to Bloomist. Sorry, I mean, how much time do we have? We're good, right? Okay. So the impetus of Bloomist really came about because of the Li and Feng connection that I told you about. 15,000 factories in 40 countries. They introduced me to another family that does the fake flowers for Michaels and Target and Walmart and many others, right? And they had been working like on a project. It is with IKEA. And IKEA's like mandate is everything must be recycled. I don't even know this. I mean, obviously we all know it's college furniture, but they've always been on top of sort of the idea of recycling, right? I mean, it's like, actually it's recycled wood, right? I mean, it's in a chipper and they just smash it together to make furniture. But they mandated everything to be upcycled and recycled. And so the family that I was working with, and again, a large family, 8 factories, 8,000 employees in China. They put out these fake flowers, but they're starting to do this recycled piece, right? So we were starting to do the line, and we're really seriously thinking like, okay, do we just do recycled, or I mean, do we also have the like virgin resins and use virgin resins in it, and just have a little portion like 70%, like we're 70% recycled paper you see sometimes, and we also wanted to be like hyper realistic, like actually have thorns where you can actually like you can even hurt yourself with it, and we use like paper mache for the balls and things rather than plastic. Yeah, I wrote this. Yeah, and I seriously remember talking to my daughter Zoe, who's in the back of the room. I mean, saying, hey, we're gonna do these fake flowers. And I said, fake flowers? I mean, that's like hurts the environment. And I was like, okay, I think the whole line needs to be sustainable and recyclable, right? And I went back with that, and they all were like, yeah, I guess you're right. They all need to be sustainable and recyclable. And when you really think about it, this is 2018, we founded this company, and it was like, if we're starting a company in 2018, I mean, you have to think about those things, even more so in 2024. Like, what are you doing to the environment? How are you reusing water? How are you looking at all your resources, as I kind of talked about before, right? So yeah, and we also thought about our mission statement. I mean, it's kind of, we're driven by that. Next slide. So I think it's always good to set one of these up, even if you are just thinking about a company in your diary. You know, I mean, it's kind of worthwhile in your journal. You know, think about what is your mission statement and what are you trying to achieve. For Bloomist, I mean, our tagline is "Make Nature Home," right? And so it's just kind of bringing in everything from nature. So all of our products are either like cycled and recycled, or they come from the earth. So this is an upcycled recycled. This is from river stones in Honduras. We designed this. I mean, so the other thing I did is I went out and found a co-founder who's ex-West Elm, ex-Martha Stewart. I do not pretend to be able to, you know, create all of these amazing things. So yeah, I mean, these are Honduran river stone. This is our own product. In fact, I mean, we can't keep these in stock practically. We get exclusively from Guatemala and the coffee fields, but they come from the eucalyptus tree or something. And they dry and they scrub them and we resell them. But we also resell, and this is also our own designs. This is like a co-branded thing, where it's all like, you know, natural soy wicks and I mean, yeah, so candle wax, everything, and it's with a company, so you know, we have like a co-branded thing. And then this is you know, this is just a tenon incense from Japan. So like we'll resell stuff, we'll have our own like IP, we call it, or we'll co-brand things. Keep going. Yeah, and so we also like look at brands that we admire. I mean, I talk about Patagonia almost ad nauseam. But you know, it's always good to kind of pick out the different brands. Like if you're a brand, even if you're tiny, even if you're like you know, writing in your journal or something, like what brands do you all like? I mean, do you like a certain clothing line or a certain drink brand or whatever it is that you're thinking about doing, or even if it's in pharmaceuticals or healthcare, or who do you want to emulate? Who do you want to appear on your board? What do you value? What brands do you admire? And what design style do you have with whatever it is that you do?
I think this resonates with me because it's very much like the vision board I have, and some of them have personal goals, but I'm sure like many of you have made vision boards before. So it's a very cool way to think of it.
Yeah. All right, keep going. Yeah. Oh, this is Patagonia. I don't want to talk about them anymore. But I mean, you know, oh, then who's your customer? Well, we can move on. We can move on. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I think you all know Patagonia pretty darn well, right? If you don't, look it up. And then the other thing is, we did this about 2 years ago. But I mean, after we get like 20,000 customers, who are they? And we super analyze them. You can actually send your database off to a company that has records of all 175 million households in the United States. And they go, okay, here's your 20,000, here's 175 million, and it's actually only like $1,500. So it's really not that expensive. And they can tell you who the hell they are. So, I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, I was like blown away. I mean, like you over-index for certain things. Like your customers live in Santa Monica and Chelsea in New York, over-indexing, you know? You over-index for buying for the season, or obviously it's female, 85%. What sports do they do? Okay, it's a runner, it's a skier, all right? What social media do they use? I mean, obviously it's a home renovator, of course. So, I mean, we sell a lot to the trade and a lot to interior designers. Let's keep moving on. Yeah. All right. So I am in the process of actually selling to my co-founder. So I'm kind of looking at the next thing already. So if anybody have a good idea, let me know. But no, I actually have a couple of different things in mind, and I'm looking at the next thing as we speak. I mean, one of the things I didn't get into too much, but I certainly can, is the private office about 2 years ago just decided to exit, and they did it pretty abruptly. So I was kind of caught in a pickle. And it was a little bit like, okay, do we just close this whole darn thing down, or do I try and take over? And it became like tense negotiation. The whole thing was closed for 3 months. And I was actually able to put together the money to buy them out, and it's operated profitably ever since then. So now I'm, like I said, in the process of most likely selling it to the co-founder. But I mean, you read any story, right? I mean, I told you the Elon Musk one. I mean, Yves Chouinard, right? The Patagonia guy. He actually started off making, the mountain climbing stuff, right? And somebody sued him because not any mountain climber, somebody playing tug of war and somebody twisted their ankle or something, and so he had to actually bankrupt the mountain climbing part of the company. And later on, his employees of that company bought it out, and it's still a company today. It's called Black Rock Mountains or something like that. So I mean, that's another like all of them have that story. Literally, all of the founders. I don't know about all of them, but I mean, most founders have a story like that, and that either on the brink of bankruptcy or literally bankrupt. So I think that's really kind of fascinating. So anyway, that's I guess a long answer to, I guess I'll use this opportunity to close it out for me, and just let me know if you have any questions about anything.
If anyone has any questions, I'll be passing this around. We can take a couple questions. But yeah.
I love your little pillow thing, whatever.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate hearing your story. You mentioned at the beginning and then throughout the various parts of your journey, this notion of partnership and bringing in other people to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish is essential. But how do you determine who to partner with and who not to partner with? Like, what's your filter look like?
And that's so hard. We all could figure that out, right? And again, reading these bios, it's like, Elon partnered with the original Tesla founders, and now that's the biggest feud ever. I mean, I always, I know I keep going back to these kind of famous stories, but for me, that helps me in my little tiny world. I mean, in terms of partnerships, I mean, I had a partner at OneZeno, and I gave him 20% of the company. And later on, I was like, I don't know if I really needed to give him 20%. But then he super helped me when I was at HSBC, and then he kind of took over the company, and he helped close down China and stuff. And I guess, I was pretty happy he was part of the company. So I think it's really kind of challenging. Again, you guys know the Apple story? There were 3 founders. This is hilarious, right? Do you guys know? All right, yeah, you know, right? Yeah, I mean, the third one said, I'm out. You guys don't know what you're doing. Just pay me out. And they go, okay, I think it was $500, right? Was it 500? Yeah. The third guy took 500 to get out of it. Get to buy out his third company. So I mean, again, it's tough. It's tough to really. That is a really challenging question. Like, who do you partner with? Do you partner with your college roommate? I didn't tell you a story about Reddit. Do you guys know? The two, they don't talk to each other at all. Okay, the history major was not part of this IPO thing at all. Okay, and the other founder erased him from the history, even though he worked there 12 years. I mean, it's a 19-year-old company, right? He worked there 12 years. Yeah, they got in a fight about how to moderate you all are on Reddit, right? I mean, 100% of you are on Reddit, right? They got in a fight about how to moderate a discussion, and they never talked to each other again. Not only did they never talk to her, the other guy, I mean, just erased him from Reddit's history. It's pretty fierce, right? So you all have business ideas, right? I mean, that's why we're in here to some extent. You all have partners, doing it with a roommate or a friend yeah, it's challenging, right? I mean, it could be. I mean, we all saw the Facebook story, right? I mean, social network, I mean, it doesn't always go so smoothly. Lawyer up, remember that line? Anyway, other questions?
Can you say one more question? Don't be shy.
That's part of the whole thing,
Yeah.
right?
How would you try to switch your mindset from a what is to a what if? In order to further just think about the problems coming up in the next like 10 years and yeah. That's it for me.
Yeah, what's your topic, like, is there a certain area?
Yeah, AI.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
interested in, but just like college campuses and wondering like how the value will change and how we might look at the Gen Alpha and
ahead,
mhm.
so you're trying to figure out the generation gap, if you will, that might be emerging between you and sort of the next folks coming up in the next 10 years or so. Yeah, I just saw this study that says like, while boomers and Xers exactly relate to how they're described, millennials and sort of Gen Z don't relate to actually how they're described. And I wonder if it's like always best to sort of group everybody together, you know what I mean, in such a way. Although I do think from a marketing point of view, they're hopeful constructs, just because, I mean, like a boomer is defined by post-World War and like it sort of might be defined by, I don't know, the Berlin Wall coming down, and millennials are definitely defined by the Great Recession and see, it's definitely defined by the pandemic, you know, and how it affected relative education in some ways, right? And so there is like a common theme, and then what's interesting is that common theme has now become global, like when like a boomer is a US phenomenon, right? I mean, there's no boomer in China, it's like, certainly, right? And there's no boomer in other areas, it's a boomer's US. The X and Z I find very fascinating, or I mean, Z and Alpha, and really started with millennials, where it was more of a global phenomenon, like I have a millennial cousin's child in China. I mean, they're on WeChat as much as a millennial would be on, you know, social media here. So there's more, and the pandemic was global, right? Great Recession was global. So these were the things that kind of affect. So I think they're good as constructs, but they're not, but don't be like sort of locked into, I think, any of those things as you think ahead, you know, and as you think the next 10 years. I don't know if that helped answer it too much.
Yeah, I do have a sister at 14, so I kind of like know, but I do get we shouldn't rely on these constructs.
Yeah.
In general.
Well, I mean, the other thing about the 14-year-old, and of course I have a 15-year-old as well, I mean, they are digital natives. I mean, they really truly are, you know, I mean, when y'all were born, I mean, we may not have even had, I mean, Facebook probably didn't even exist, you know, perhaps, right? But you know, when you think about even just your younger siblings, you know, I mean, they never didn't have it, never didn't have an iPad. I mean, iPhone was 2007, so that's a certain break point. So I think they are helpful, I do. I mean, just like I showed you our client base, it's very, very helpful. But I think it also is very dangerous in a way, because it could exclude you from a whole client base that might use your product in a certain way. So I think that's kind of interesting. All right. There was another question. I'm happy to answer anything up here too, if you want to kick it off, Mike.
It seems like we're having another group coming in, but
Okay.
please feel free to stick around, talk to Mike and grab some food. And yeah, thank you, Mike, so much for your time.
Thank you.